Guys, everyone, welcome. Um,
Cool.
these are the live sessions at the Self Club. And these sessions, just started as a way to explore a little bit some of these basics of the self, right? How to be happier, how to explore different sides of ourselves that maybe are a bit more complex. Okay. And I think these are conversations that in society we need to be having more often. All right, things that we don't know how to talk about, how to feel about, right? We don't have vocabulary to manage certain aspects of the self. So yeah, and the Self Club, I'm the founder of the Self Club, Samantha Sacchi, for those of you who don't know me. And I'm an educator and a strategist and like a life and business coach. And the Self Club is dedicated basically to creating a more self-aware, emotionally intelligent, and socially conscious world. And these conversations are one of the ways that we do that. And Matt, also one of the
Hey,
Self Club special guests and coaches and collaborators. I'll let you introduce yourself.
hey guys. Some of you I don't know yet. My name's Matt. I'm a coach, a life coach, if you like, and I've been specializing in emotional intimacy and personal responsibility. A large part of that is understanding what drives our experiences, what drives our emotions, what drives what we need to do from day to day, and a large part of that is needs. This is a really cool opportunity for us to talk through what's important, why is it important, and explore that a little bit further.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Well, let's dive right in. I'm excited because we've been for those of you who have been following and those who haven't, right? We've been talking about, this triad, right? That is kind of like the basics of self-esteem and healthy relationships, and it's emotions, needs, and boundaries. We've done a talk like this on emotions, which you can find on YouTube. We have done one on boundaries, which will be up soon. And we did the one on needs. We're repeating it because we didn't record. So here we are, and how all these three connect. All right. So let's dive straight into needs. Just to give a little bit of context,
Yeah.
like what are needs?
Yeah. And it's probably quite a cool one to start with, because I think boundaries and emotions fit into this idea of needs as well. So I would say that needs is the overarching one, and then everything else kind of fits into needs. So we talked about these three fitting into self-esteem, right? So self-esteem is, well, how do I feel about myself? Obviously, we use that with some comparison to others. So do I treat myself with equal love, care, and respect as other people, right? So, and obviously a large part of that is my needs, right? My vulnerabilities, my limitations, right? Do I look after those as much as I care and look after those of other people? So I'd say self-esteem is that almost like equality of seeing yourself as equally as important as other people.
Mm-mm. And could we call needs, like I like to see needs themselves as like the basic requirement for our survival and fulfillment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's like,
think that's a nice way to look at it. And I would say the overarching idea for me is to understand that what makes life special, right? And I guess the best answer I can come up with so far is that it comes to an end, right? Life comes to an end. All of us will die eventually. But what makes it special is that each moment is special because we only experience it once, right? So our limitations, if you like, are what make us special, right? It's what makes us need to be cared for by other people as well. Right? So it's easy to see with a newborn child, right? Is that they're completely needy, right? They require us to look after all of their needs, right? And yet we adore them, right? We look at them, and of course, if it's your own child, even more so. But you look at them, and it fires off a circuit in us that wants to help, that wants to care for that child. So hence, yeah,
yes. So getting into that, then so we say needs are the basic requirement, right, for our survival and
yeah,
fulfillment. And as children, right, it's other people's jobs to meet our needs, right, to meet those basic requirements. And as we've talked about before, as we get older, right, and I think we're all adults here, and that's why we're having this conversation, right? As we get older, it's our job and our responsibility to actually understand, first of all, which is already a big thing we'll talk about today, and then to actually meet our own needs. right? But I think we can say as a starting point, Matt, that all of life is about meeting our needs, right?
Yeah,
You get a job to meet your needs. You get in a relationship to meet your needs. You smoke a cigarette to meet your needs, right? You
yeah,
move to another city to meet your needs. You buy a house to meet your needs.
yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
all of life about meeting your needs?
yeah. Ultimately, you can see that, and obviously, there's different levels of those needs, and maybe that's why we talk about, like, some are more fundamental than others, and some we can postpone a bit longer than others, right? Like, you can't survive very long without air, right? As a simple one, right? But you can survive a bit longer without having sex, right? So, but they're all needs, right? They're all part of us that we want to experience, and we drive us towards those experiences. So it's like and what's interesting as well about needs is that they're fluid, right? You can meet a need now, right, and then feel satiated and so on, and then you need it again 10 months later, or 2 weeks later, or five minutes later, right? So needs are kind of fluxing. You can meet them now, and then you require them again later. So yes.
Yeah, and they might change, right? So that you might need something one moment, and then 10 minutes later you need something different, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think I
And
like to talk about this topic that we did touch on the other one later, but I like to define it now at the beginning, the difference between needs and values, right?
yeah.
Because I love that needs are more like momentary, right? They might vary from moment to moment, but values are those things that we need on a long-term basis, right? And perhaps to fulfill our higher order values, all
Mm-hmm.
right? Our higher order needs, sorry, but it's the
Yeah.
things we need in our life continuously.
Yeah. And maybe, right. So to understand, first of all, what a value is, right? A value is an emotional state that you want to experience on a regular basis, right? So let's say it's love, right? I want to experience that beautiful golden feeling of love on a regular basis, right? So you might have that quite high up on your values list, right? You might say, I also want to experience health, right? I want to feel healthy regularly, right? So I feel good in my body, and I'm able to move and get through time and space, right, as well as I can, right? So health might be one that you value, right? But you could also say that there's an element of needs that fit into that, as that maybe we have a need for love as well, right? Meaning that we can't survive without it, even though it's an emotion that we experience. So a good way to understand the difference between values or emotions, because values are emotions, if you like, in that respect, and needs being more motivations, drives, something that we as a body require, right? So as a body, we certainly require air, right? So we know we need air, water, food, shelter. We need to maintain body heat and so on, right? So there's certain elements of that we need, right? And then obviously they're the more fundamental ones that if we don't look after the body, then, right, the mind and our self-actualization and so on doesn't really matter. If we're dead, right, who gives a shit whether we're in love or not, right? So there's an element of necessity to those needs, right? And that's where we come up with this idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
right? Is that there's the most basic ones, fundamental ones that we have to meet on a regular basis, right? And then ones that we aim towards. As we manage to stack on those different levels, we get better and better at meeting the fundamental ones, so then we can actually then focus on higher end ones. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's quite an art, right? Figuring out how to prioritize, right? Fulfilling our basic needs while still taking care of the higher needs that will take us to higher feelings as well, right? Not just feeling safe, but also feeling like fulfilled, feeling that
Yeah.
our life has a purpose, right? So
Yeah.
life is complex in that, wow, we are these mundane creatures that have these very mundane basic needs, yet we're these like beings with consciousness that want to contribute and have our best life, and have these other feelings that we have on a long-term basis to make our life make sense. So this is why this topic is so beautiful and complex.
Yeah, it is. And we talked about that just briefly before, like saying the more we look into this, the more we realize how complex this is. Right? But to simplify things a little bit easier, it's just like if you think of a need as being the limitations that we as humans have, right? The fact that we die makes us special, right? In one way. So we have certain needs or requirements to maintain ourselves during that time, even though we will eventually die, right? So the better we get at that, the longer we survive, right? So that's a damn good motivation to be aware of your needs, right? It's like, well, if you're aware of them, you'll probably last a bit longer.
Totally. So let's get into this topic. Like, why I think we
Okay.
need to talk about why it's important to become aware of our needs, because the point is we have them, right? One, we have basic requirements or for survival and fulfillment,
Yeah.
but we might not always be aware of them. And we're talking about this because we need to bring all of that, and that's what the Self Club does, right? Like, bring all that unconscious stuff that's like driving our life into the conscious realm, so we can make better decisions, conscious decisions, instead of just
Yeah.
letting the subconscious drive us. So what does it look like to meet? What does it look like when somebody is aware of their needs and is meeting them in a
Yeah.
healthy way?
In a healthy way. Well, generally you'll see someone being quite successful in life, right? It's because they're taking responsibility for what they need, giving it to themselves so that they can actually keep moving on to the next step, right? So needs being, I need homeostasis, right? So I need to be okay, but then I'm also driving towards a future me as well, right? So there's maybe future goals that I have, and I'll need to be working towards those, but I have to be damn good at meeting my need for food, water, air, right, shelter, friendship, and so on to be okay now, right? In order to be able to actually postpone some of that time, or if you like, or sacrifice some of what I need to do now to give myself something in the future. So the better we get at our fundamental needs, the more likely we are to be moving towards a greater or better future, right? Where maybe it's easier for ourselves to meet our needs. Right? Most of the things that we think about in terms of like, I want to have more money, right? So I can be healthier, so I can travel more, so X, Y, Z, right? All of the things that we like to have in the future, basically those things are just helping us to meet our needs better, right? Or easier in the future. Right? So we're meeting our needs well enough now so that we can build towards making it easier for ourselves in the future. Kind of like
Totally. And I like that, right? Because a life where you are aware of your needs and you're meeting them, like you said, it's like I take care of the basics, like the food that I eat, right? Like physical exercise. And then I'm also, working towards certain important goals, certain things I need to
right,
feel fulfilled. But some people that maybe are only taking care of the higher end, right? Like building their business, but then they're not eating and they're not sleeping. And after a month or two, they have a complete breakdown, right? Because they weren't
right,
aware of some of those basic needs. So
yeah.
it's really important to be aware of the whole realm.
Yeah, and I think we're all guilty of that one. Is getting focused on one thing and neglecting others, or thinking, oh, it's okay, I can put off those things, right, and I'll come back to them later. But eventually, yeah, there's some things that if we don't look after ourselves, there's unconscious behaviors that take over, right? And this is where we realize that if you don't look after your needs in a conscious basis, right, unconsciously it will do it. Which means usually when it's conscious, you're doing it in a functional way. You're doing it in a way that is suitable and sustainable, right, to repeat it. Right? So if let's say you need to meet your need for food, nutrition, and so on. So as a conscious level, you're like, okay, well, I'll eat healthy food as much as I can. Right? That's probably an element of us that we're able to do sustainably. Right? If we're not caring for that, we're focused on something else. Right? After a while, you know what it's like when you get late at night, right, and you're tired. Right? Then there's an unconscious behavior that just makes you want to eat something. Right? And it's most likely you're not going to reach for the apple or the salad or something like that, right, at midnight. Right? You reach for the thing that's going to give you the most buck for your money, right? If you like, it's going to give you a boom for your buck. Sorry, it's like you're going to go for the chocolate, you're going to go for crisps, you're going to go for something that's very high in calories. Right? And that's usually not something that's sustainable because you're giving yourself something, a short burst of it now, but then tomorrow you're going to regret it. So hence, people who you often see the people who exercise, do too much on their business, they then don't have a good body. Right? So they're not looking after being healthy. They're not sleeping well. They're sacrificing their health for their business. And you see this with families as well. People who work too much, then their relationships break down. So the basic idea is if we don't get aware of these needs and meet them in a sustainable, functional way, it's going to happen in a dysfunctional way unconsciously, and we're going to wish we hadn't.
So that's so basically they become like distractions, right? Like we end up distracting ourselves from our true needs by just kind of finding whatever is closest or easiest, right? The path of least resistance to feel how we want to feel, right? To maybe stop feeling sad. So we're sad, and maybe what we need is love, right? Maybe what we need is comfort or reassurance or a hug. But because we might be too scared even to admit that to ourselves, we're scared of being vulnerable, we'll just, reach for the chocolate or reach for the beer.
Right.
Yeah. So
And
distractions. Yeah.
And that's a big part, right? And that's where we really see this kind of dysfunctional element playing out. Right? Is that if we're not caring about it and aware of it and doing it in a way that maintains everything else, the addictions or the distractions, if you like to call them, will take over. So for sure, if you are not maintaining your requirements or your need for comfort and love and connection, right, after a while, like we can often replace, or we'll feel a certain emotion, right? Let's say, because emotions and these needs are intrinsically linked together, right? So if you're going well towards meeting a need, or you're maintaining a need regularly, you'll feel good, right? You'll get positive emotions. And we know that from when we eat, right? When we eat something, we feel good, we feel satiated, right? When we have sex, we feel good, and we feel fulfilled, if you like.
Well, it depends, but
well, hopefully, yeah. If it went well, then yeah. Then
yeah,
exactly.
it depends with who, depends how it was. But yeah.
And that's the point, right? It's like if you manage to meet those needs, then you'll feel good, right? So your emotional drives, if you like, are telling you, yes, you did that well, you succeeded, right? So your emotions are heavily linked to your drives and your needs, motivations.
But can you give me an example of how like alcohol or sex can become an addiction and it becomes meeting our need in a dysfunctional way?
Right. And this is the way that if you manage to do it well, you'll feel good from it. Right? Now, if you don't manage to do well, you're basically going to trigger off some negative emotion, if you like, an emotion that's linked to a feeling of dissatisfaction or disappointment or having lost something or pain. Right? So negative emotion is what you'll experience when your needs are not being met. Right? Now, often we're not necessarily aware of why we're feeling what we're feeling. We're quite numb to it quite often. Right? And we've all experienced this, is that sometimes, right, we're sad or angry or upset and we don't always know why. Right? It's not so obvious to know why. So if we don't know what to solve, we just think, well, what can I do that makes me feel better? Right? So then we'll go to one of the other needs, right? Let's say you're lonely, right? But you can't meet that need, or you don't know how to meet that need in a functional way. So you're like, well, I'll eat some ice cream, right? And we see this all the time. You break up from a relationship, it's like, okay, well, get the Ben and Jerry's ice cream out, and you sit in front of the TV and you scuff yourself, right? So, and that's a way that we're transferring our feel good, right? Rather than meeting the actual need we needed, we're meeting other needs that give us a positive emotion. Right?
And I want to take it
are a distraction from that first one.
Yeah, and I want to give an example that's like beyond ice cream, like sex, right? Because for example, sex could be a physical need that we have. It could be, maybe we are not so in touch with it as we should be, right? With that self-awareness, really understanding where the lines are. But it's a need. But also some people might feel that loneliness, right? Because they have a need for love, right? Or for intimacy, and they will go and perhaps find somebody to have sex with that maybe has no meaning at that moment, but satiates what they feel. Right? It kills the emotion, just like the ice cream would. But the key that you were saying before is after that, after meeting that need, there isn't a feeling of joy or satisfaction. There's still a feeling of kind of emptiness, right? Like the fundamental need hasn't really been met, whether it's sleeping with somebody or having the ice cream or playing 3 hours of video games, right? The need hasn't been met fundamentally.
And there can be, because obviously in the moment we'll feel good because we're driving towards and we're meeting a certain need, right? But other ones are still left unmet, right? So let's say, right, we have circuits in our brain, right, which are very specific to certain things. So we know that we have a pain circuit. We know we have a sexual circuit. We know we have a care circuit. And so there's different parts of our brain which are specific in maintaining those elements of our limitations, of the things that we need. So if we ignore this need for care, right, for intimacy, for love, for connection, for feeling like we are important to someone, and instead we think that going and having sex, which is our sexual drive, our lust, right? So we meet that need for lust, which gives us a positive feeling. But then once we're done, it's like you have a pleasure, right? You have the experience, you have your orgasm, you're like, oh, that was wonderful. But then as soon as that need has been met and satiated, you come back to, I still feel lonely, right? I still feel sad, right? And the same goes when we eat food, right? Let's say you're distracting yourself from your work, right? And to do that, you watch some TV, right? So you meet your need for comfort, right? But then as soon as you finish that, you're like, oh shit, still got that work to do, right? And we come back and we have that little twang of pain again. So hence the addiction or the distraction can be a distraction. It's true. It gives you positive emotion because you are doing something good, but it's distracting you from the one that you actually needed to look after.
Totally. And that's why it's so important to become aware of all of them, right? Because I've heard a lot of people, for example, some of my friends, my clients, myself, have been surrounded with a lot of people, right? But really felt lonely. So the need for connection, for intimacy, for love is a basic human need that we all have, just like we need to go to the bathroom or drink water. And we're just less in touch with it, right? Like us saying, hey, I really need to go to the bathroom is very understood. Oh, he has to go, right? But us having conversations around with our partner, with our family, with our friends, like, hey, I need some deeper connection. I need to feel like I'm, love from the relationship we have. Like, that's vulnerable, that's scary. So I wanted to ask you, like, what do people do if they're kind of ashamed of their needs? Because I think there's a lot of that. What do we do with that?
Right. And this is primarily the reason why we have all the addictions in the first place. Is like there's a lack of awareness, right, of not knowing necessarily what we do really need. Right? But the other one is then, well, even if we're aware of it, we're afraid of showing it. Right. If we think of our vulnerabilities are the things that we require or need, right? So our fundamental limitations, right, is what makes us vulnerable. And if those needs are not being met, then we die, right? So that's inherently what we are shy about showing, because if someone doesn't meet it, or if they use that against us, right, then it hurts even more.
It's so scary. Yeah.
Right. So we're quite vulnerable to show what we really need. So there's two elements to it. One is sometimes we don't know, and the other one is even if we know, we're afraid to show it, right? Because we have had those needs shamed in the past, right? Certainly, I mean, I know that throughout my childhood, right, sexuality was something that it was taboo, right? It wasn't talked about. It was completely ignored. And who knows what happened and why my parents were a little bit taboo around that. But there was shaming going on in that. So I grew up in an environment where, some of my needs were hidden away. Right? I wasn't aware of them. Right? I wasn't taught that was something that I had to care for, look after, and certainly no one showed me how I should do that in a functional way. So yeah, for sure, those vulnerabilities are key. That if those have been shamed, then not only do we experience the need or the lack of that need being met, but then whenever we think about it, we then feel that like twang of shame of like, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't talk about it. I shouldn't be aware. I shouldn't open up and be vulnerable with people about this.
Absolutely. So what we're kind of concluding here, right? Because we've been talking a lot of things is, well, we have these needs fundamentally as a part of our life, all right? Because it's short, we need to have some basic requirements, all right, to stay alive and be happy. And we can meet them in a functional way, right? Which looks like balance, right? It looks like feeling productive, creative, self-confident, right? We can fulfill all the different levels of needs, which we'll get to in a moment.
And a key part of that is sustainable, is that you can do it it's socially accepted. People are happy with it, and you can repeat it many times consistently, and you know that that's a pretty good sign that you're meeting it in a functional way.
Yeah, cool. And then there's the dysfunctional side, right? Which is I'm not really in touch with my needs. So they're just kind of being met on this autopilot, which might look like distractions. It might look like distractions that turn into addictions, whether it be alcohol, even an
Yeah,
addiction to external validation, right? Always having people tell me it's okay, or
yeah,
sex, right? Or any other go-to that is the one thing you go
yeah,
to kind of kill what you're feeling, but not to really satisfy the underlying need.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah,
and this job of like understanding our needs is really like a lifelong thing. It requires some serious self-reflection, right? And I think it's a bit of like trial and error. Like a lot of life is experimentation, right? We
yeah,
might learn from others, and we could see what kind of works and what doesn't, right? We can talk to specialists and coaches, and they'll probably be like, well, yeah, I think the alcohol is not the way to meet your need. I think the cigarettes is not the way to meet your need. I think, there's this other underlying need happening. So some people might help us in our own self-reflection too, right? Like journaling. We could be like, oh, I thought I needed this and I tried it, but I actually felt really empty after. So it wasn't that, right?
right.
And you keep kind of having those conversations with yourself to slowly understand what you need. And it is, guys, those emotions that are the navigation system to understand
Yeah.
whether the needs are being met or not.
Right, and that's where we get into this topic, right, of understanding why we're talking about this in the first place. It's to say that if we do not meet those needs, if we don't look after them, we will feel shit, right? Because that's the whole point of our emotional system is to navigate us towards meeting our needs. So when we're doing well and we're successful at that, we feel good, right? And when we're not doing well and we're not successful at it, we will feel shit. So I mean that's a big enough drive anyway, just to say, well, hey, you want to feel happy, right? You want to be aware of what you feel and then adjust your life to match it, right?
Yeah. And that's the beauty of emotions, guys, right? Like that, wow, we have an actual physical navigation system that when things are going well, it's like, yeah, smooth, we're feeling good. We maybe have a smile on our face. We're feeling confident. And when things are not going well, and we're going to get right now into some of the frameworks, right? Like Maslow. Let's take Maslow's pyramid, right?
Yeah,
And look at how what the emotions behind not meeting the different parts looks like, right? Like on the most basic level, like the physiological needs, if you
yeah,
have to go to the bathroom and you hold it, like you will start getting pain, right?
mm-hmm.
You will feel so physically uncomfortable that you feel like you're going to explode, right? You'll just like push people out of the way to get to the
Right.
bathroom.
And this is where you can see that your limitations, right, your needs, your motivations, they set goals for you, right? So your motivations, your needs, your limitations is what drives your goals, right? It's what defines your goals. Like when you need the toilet, that's what you're thinking about, right? And it's obviously the more fundamental is the quicker it needs to happen, right? So hence, yes, the motivations are what drive your goals, and then your emotions is what helps tell you whether you're succeeding in that, right? It helps you regulate your activity towards that goal. So if you're aiming towards it and then you go the wrong way, you'll feel shit, right? Even if, let's say you need the toilet and you go the wrong way, right? you're gonna feel a twang of negative emotion, right? To say, oh shit, I've gone the wrong way. Where the hell is this damn toilet, right? And of course, if you succeed and you get to the toilet, you're like, ah.
Totally,
you'll
exactly. And
you'll
then
feel you'll feel that positive experience of having at least satiated yourself in that respect. Yeah.
exactly. And that's that kind of like base of the pyramid, right? Let's take it one higher with
Yeah.
like safety needs. Like, let's imagine I don't have a roof over my head and I'm sleeping out on the street, let's say, right? I'm probably going to be feeling like fear
Right.
for my own safety, right? Like, what are people going to do to me at night if I'm not covered, if I don't have my own like private space?
Yeah.
I might
Yeah. You've
feel
got
also,
people. You've got nature. I mean, there's so many elements to that which comes in, and then of course that's where you've got. I mean, pain is instantaneous, right? You know that you're experiencing pain, which means something is being damaged in your body. So you have sensors to tell you that you should stop doing what you're doing, right? You should change something. Fear is the circuit which tells you about something that you can imagine happening in the future. right? So you can imagine yourself being hurt, being damaged in the future. So of course, if you're out in the wilderness, I mean, it only takes you to go out in the forest and right, do one night alone in the forest to realize how vulnerable you are and how much actually you're then pretty careful about what you do and what you look at, and you're happy to have a torch if you have one, and so on. So if if those fundamental needs of safety are not being met, you will experience fear, anxiety, panic, right? For sure. And we have those circuits built into our brain again, right? So we have pain circuits, we have fear circuits, and we have panic circuits. So if we really feel like danger is imminent, right, we do go into this panic state, right? And that's what we quite often talk about, kind of fight and flight circuits. Yeah. Right? So of course and when we experience that, we want to experience that just because that's useful. It serves us, right? To feel that enables us to act and say, okay, I'm going to do something. I'm going to run. I'm going to get out of this situation. If I can run in a straight line, I'll get out of the forest. Right? It's moving us away from danger, right? Either immediately or a danger that we can perceive happening in the future. So those emotions really guide us towards meeting our needs in a functional way.
Oh, yeah, totally. So that's what it looks like for that, like, kind of real safety, right? Yeah. That need for safety. And let's take it one higher: social belonging. Right. So yeah,
and that's quite heavily linked to what you just talked about. Is say, or if you are let's say back 100,000 years ago, right? We're living in the forest, right? We've got people around us, and those people are what protect us, right? Because having 100 eyes looking out for danger is a lot better than just you on your own, right? We feel much safer in a group, right? So that social situation of needing other people around us actually helps us to feel safer and feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and that neurological, like, wiring for belonging is totally linked to survival, as you just said. And that's why we have also the fear of rejection, right? If we are rejected by the pack, we are less likely to survive. So there's definitely a survival component to the social belonging. And then there's another aspect to it, right? Which is the connection part. Right. There's a survival part, there's a connection part. So how might it feel like? What emotions might indicate to us that social belonging need is not being met?
Well, for sure, loneliness, right? So we're going to experience. It's debatable whether loneliness is an emotion itself, but you'll certainly feel sad, right? So sadness is a pure emotion, but you can say, okay, well, I will experience sadness, when I'm feeling lonely, right? That's for sure. So if you're not meeting that need for connection, you're going to feel sad. But obviously, sadness indicates many things, right? So that's where it's useful to kind of notice when you feel sad and why you feel sad. What are you thinking about? What are you experiencing when you feel those moments of sadness?
I want to give a real example about this because we didn't talk about this before, but one of the dysfunctional ways sometimes to meet needs is, like, we might be sad, right, fundamentally, deeply, but we're so out of touch with that sadness, or we might, like, shame or judge that sadness so much that we mask that sadness with another emotion, like anger. Mm-hmm. And I remember when there was this shooting in the US of a guy who brought a gun and killed I don't know how many people. And I remember watching, like, his selfie videos. And he was, like, so angry, right? Like, he was so angry at the people that, like, rejected him. And that is such a great example of, like, sadness masked in anger, right? Because if you feel, like, rejected, like, if you're angry that you got rejected, there must be such deep sadness behind that. And because that person clearly didn't know how to get in touch with that sadness, feel that sadness, meet the needs that might come of belonging, of connection, right? Wow, that anger becomes such that, right, the way that he dysfunctionally met that need was to go off and kill the people that made him feel that in the first place.
Right, and obviously a part of that is feeling important, feeling significant to other people. Right? So we have this desire to connect and to feel close to people. Right? And of course, that one we can say, well, I feel significant because I have a significant other, right? There's someone else who cares about me, right? And obviously we then feel important because of that. Now, if that's not being met, right, then we feel unimportant. We feel nihilistic. We feel like, well, nothing matters. Right? And it's like, well, if I don't matter, right, then it doesn't matter if I and kill myself if I die, and if I'm going to die, why not take people with me, right? So there's an element of, if you're really not happy, if you're really sad, then after a while you can feel bitter and resentful of other people who are doing well, right? Who are being loved and cared for. And this is why you see this experience where some people who are so angry with existence, right? They're so unhappy with how their life has played out, right? That they want to take it out on innocent people. They're not looking for people who hurt them, right? They're looking to hurt the innocent. So that's another element, which is really them feeling resentful towards the whole existence of life, because they haven't learned how to meet those needs well.
Yeah, and I guess that touched on the next part of Maslow, which was the self-esteem part, right?
Right.
Yeah, when your own needs for self-esteem, for feeling that you matter, that you're
Right.
enough, that your needs are important, right? That your emotions are important, that you deserve to be seen.
Love, care, and respect, I would say, is a good way to really understand what that means. It's like, if you're being loved, you're cared for, you're respected, right? You feel good about yourself, right? And the same goes when you treat other people with love, care, and respect, right? You create this relationship of reciprocity, of care, right, between each other, right? And then you both feel important in that situation. As soon as that's broken, as soon as either people are not loving, caring, or respectful towards you, right, then you'll often feel sad or angry towards those people. And if it's chronic, then yeah, of course, that's when things really go bad.
Yeah, definitely. So this is the juicy part too, all right? Getting to the top of Maslow's pyramid, which I think is like quite complex, right? Because let's say I'm meeting the full bottom part of the pyramid. I have my physiological needs met, safety needs, I'm good, social belonging, have a group of friends, I hang out with them, we have reciprocity, I have a self-esteem, I think I matter, right? I have love, people care about me, I care about people. But something's not right. It's, like, I feel that I've been in this job for 2 years. Yeah, I have money, have a good relationship, maybe I have kids, maybe I'm thinking about them, but just something. And I think that these emotions and these needs are a bit more subtle. I think that they often creep up on you. They're not so physiological, right? Like the lack of self-actualization or the lack of transcendence is not just gonna like hit you in your stomach one day. Or it might. Or it might. But I think it's like, it's a little more subtle and difficult to understand those needs.
Exactly. And I would say all of those, if you think from a very basic fundamental level, is that when you're hungry or when you're thirsty or when you're out of air, right, it becomes very important, right, to do something quick, right? While self-actualization, which is a case of what you exploring and getting to know yourself, right, getting to know how you fit in with other people, right? It's kind of this oneness or spirituality that we often talk about. It's like, how do I know that there's something more important than me? Right? And there's an element of that which is much more subtle. So, because again, like all of the other needs need to be met on a consistent basis, right? And you know that in the future that they're going to be met before you can actually focus on any of the higher levels of the pyramid. So there's no way you're going to be thinking about self-actualization if you're not eating, if you don't have shelter, if you're not having a close group of friends.
No, totally. And I agree with that. But now I want to talk about the self-actualization. I want to talk about how does the body talk to us? How do I get in touch with myself to figure out what I need to feel self-actualization? Because I think that's where a lot of people are at, especially in first world countries, right? Like we're not thinking about safety, right? We might be thinking about money and maybe goals and how much we want to invest, but we're not worried that we're not going to have food at the end of the day, right? We're even if we did lose our job with the current situation, we live in a country that will more or less take care of us. Like, I think a lot of people actually sacrificing some of their lower needs. Like, I don't want to buy a house. I'm happy camping around and sleeping in the wilderness because I'm looking for something bigger, because I want to feel that my life has a purpose. So what do you think are
and I'd say an element of that is that they're so trusting, right, in the system they have around them, that they feel like, well, they don't need to worry about that because I can always meet my need for food, water, and so on. So I don't need I can always go to a hotel. I've got enough money that if one day I'm cold living out in my trailer or in my camper car, right, then I can always go home. I've got somewhere I can go back to and look after. That's usually such a confidence in the system that we built that we then feel comfortable to neglect some of it for a higher one. But I would say that most of the time, even if you just look after those things, right, and you see this, I mean, my brother's maybe a good example of someone who's really looked after his basic needs, right? He's got a steady job, family, children, right, small group of friends, and yet there's an element of that, like you're doing pretty well with your life, but then something feels missing. Right? And you're like, okay, there's something more. I should be learning about me. I should be learning about myself. I should be growing and so on. And this is that self-actualization that we want to become intimate with ourselves. We want to understand who we are, what we're here for, what's our purpose, leave a legacy, right? Have something more than that basic fundamental needs.
And I think this is where Tony Robbins' like 6 core needs frameworks fits quite well as well,
Yeah.
right? So that Tony Robbins says there's the need for certainty, so assurance, right, that we can avoid pain and gain pleasure. We also have a need for uncertainty or variety, all right, the need for the unknown, for change, the need for significance, right? So that need to actually feel unique or important, the need for connection and love.
Right. And those 4, they're really what he describes as being the requirements of the body, right? For you to actually maintain yourself, to look after and to survive, right? There's survival needs. And then after that, it's like, well, how do you then kind of meet the higher end needs? Right? One is you need to grow, right? So growth is then the 5th one he talks about. Right? And that's what will give you that feeling of happiness. So you feel like you're not just meeting your needs, you're progressing and getting better at them as you go through. Right? So that growth is the way that you get to feel like you're progressing. And then the 6th one is then, well, once I've done that, is that enough, right? Can I just be completely selfish and just look after myself and meet all of my needs and that's it? Well, no, there's an element of that doesn't feel good, is you want to be able to give back as well. You want to be able to contribute, and maybe that's through your children, maybe it's through your career, maybe it's through an invention that you've created, but there's an element of something that you want to be able to give back.
So contribution, right? The need for contribution.
Right, contribution, exactly. Yeah, and this is what he describes as being that brings you fulfillment, right, in your life, to really feel like you've achieved, you've done well.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into, as we close up, because we're going to close up in like 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about how. So like, how can the people listening right now start to get more in touch with their own needs?
Right. And maybe we need to touch back on, well, why are we out of touch with them? Right. And that really comes down to, if we're not aware of what we're feeling, if we're trying to numb ourselves or try to distract ourselves or just feel good in any way we can, then we're not aware, we're not listening to this self-guidance system inside. Right? So our emotions help us to understand whether we are navigating successfully towards those needs or not. So if we shut that down, we also shut down the ability to navigate, right? To understand what we need and when we need it.
So that's the basic how, right? Like the first how, everyone listening, like it's simple, doesn't mean it's easy, but the simple way to start to really understand and get in touch with your own needs is listening to your feelings and your emotions. All right. Yeah. And we're so out of touch as a society. That's why we did start with the live session on emotions. We haven't been given like permission to feel or to listen to our feelings. And Matt and I right now are giving you full permission. And not only permission, but it is actually your responsibility, all right, to feel your emotions, to feel your feelings and understand what that means for you. That is the first most important path to start understanding and discovering yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the things that we should have talked about earlier, is to say, well, what's our responsibility in terms of meeting those needs? Because the joke around, are you needy or am I, is this idea of, am I looking after my needs well? Right? And am I aware that there are many ways of meeting that need? And this is what we talked about as well in terms of the dysfunctional one, or the addictions and so on. But there are multiple forms of functional ways to meet our needs. And obviously someone who is needy has established one way that they can meet the need. And then they're saying, you need to do this for me. I need this, so you have to do this for me. Right? Otherwise, I'm not okay. And they may be a bit narrow viewed in how they meet those needs.
And we see that happening in relationships, right? So I might be in a
Yeah.
relationship and I have a need for intimacy, right? Or for connection. And so I will always be looking to my partner to be like, oh, can we sit and talk? Can you walk me through this? And then my partner starts feeling like, oh my God, she's so needy.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that like we all have the needs, but if I'm depending on one source only to meet that need, that's not sustainable, right? Probably
Right.
not that healthy. What if that person or that thing is not there? Then what happens to our need? Are we gonna die, right? So
Right.
like you
It
said,
feels like
right?
it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And that's why it's good to like I love this framework I often use of like becoming the manager of your own life, right? And so you're kind of responsible for, it's like a business, right? You're responsible for it functioning. So I'm the one that has to take responsibilities for for my emotions. Oh, what's that I'm feeling? I think I need this. And then you can have multiple resources and multiple people, right? And I might go to my coach when I don't know what I need, right? And I need some help. I might go get a massage if I need to relax, right? I might call a friend and ask if they can go for a walk, or I might ask my partner, right? I have a variety of ways of meeting my needs as that manager of my life that I am. Yeah, but I don't depend on any one person or thing to
Right.
constantly always meet that need.
Right. And that's where it's okay to have some dependency on others, right? And that's why we talk about interdependence.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you look after my needs, I look after yours, and we do this kind of thing together. Right? And that's a responsible way of you creating relationships to help meet each other's needs. A dysfunctional way is to say, well, I'm only able to meet that need from that one person, so I'm completely dependent on them, which means that I basically let them, right, decide how they treat me because I need them. Right? And
I'm
then we
gonna
can
give an
get into,
example of that. Not exactly that, but I went through like a mini existential crisis in the past 3 days.
right.
And you often help me with those things and I can talk to you with them. And you weren't there, right? Because you were
Right.
going through something.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, right? And it made me think about this. It made me think about the needs. It made me think about who else is there and helps me with these sort of things, right? It
Right.
really got me in touch with that, and it was interesting. It was interesting,
Yeah.
but that's what it looks like. So it's really cool to, and that's another way, right? Getting in touch with those feelings when you start feeling like entitled, right? And
Right.
not with you, right? But with somebody else, like your partner. Oh my God, he should have been there for me. It's his job to, like, wait, what's going on here? Whose responsibility is this
Right.
need of mine? Because it's not theirs, right?
Yeah.
It's mine.
And
I also,
that's where
yeah,
that's where it's really cool for us to be able to notice how much responsibility we're taking, and when we're angry that someone else hasn't done something to meet our need, we need to realize, well, they're not responsible for that most of the time, right? Is that
yeah.
it's good that maybe you've created a relationship in which case you do have kind of an agreement that you'll meet each other's needs in a certain respect, but
So I have a
you want
question.
yeah, you want to have the ability to meet the needs in other ways, right? Because otherwise you are fully dependent on them. So let's say you need like love, care, respect. You want to have that intimacy with people, right? To feel like you're important, you're significant, that you matter. Right? So you want to have a relationship. That's the fundamental one that will really help you, is to have that intimate relationship with your partner. But then you also want to have friends, you want to have family, you want to have hobbies, you want to have a career, you want to have all those other elements of social interaction where you feel important. Right? That if your partner goes away on holiday for a week, right? And it's like, okay, well, how do I feel good about myself while those persons or those people are not available to me?
Yeah, exactly. And so to kind of finish off on this particular topic, on the difference between self-sufficiency and independence, which is not always healthy. And I think we've fallen into this trap of, it's not that you have to meet all of your needs. You're responsible for all your needs, but you will need different people and different things and
Yeah,
different circumstances to meet them. And that's
yeah,
why I want, and I always emphasize this because I've fallen into the trap of self-sufficiency myself. Like, oh, I don't need anybody, or better yet, right? Or worse yet, I shouldn't need anyone. And that
anyone.
is the biggest fallacy and the biggest trap individualistic societies have fallen into. That is complete BS.
Yeah.
We need people to survive.
Yeah.
We
And
cannot live alone on an
that's
island.
where we see the two sides of the scale, right? Is that you have the needy person, which is the person who thinks that they need someone to do all of their need to look after themselves, right? So they're very much so like, and they're the ones that we see as being very needy. Right? They're the ones who call you all the time. They're always on the phone asking for something, like, because they haven't yet found a way to be a little bit more independent. And they haven't found multiple ways of meeting their needs, so they're dependent on you. So then you feel that neediness, and you want to push away, right? But the other side of the scale is the ones who are completely self-sufficient, right? And then it's much harder to feel love from them, right? Because they don't need you for anything. Right? And as we said at the beginning, that your vulnerabilities, your limitations is what enables you to be loved. Right? So it's important that the other side is that you do allow people to meet that need for you sometimes. Right? So then you can create that bond and that connection, because we all have that part of us that wants to be able to care, to contribute, to give.
Totally. And how beautiful to feel needed sometimes, right? Guys, how do you feel when a friend's like, oh my God, right? You talk with them and then you hang up and they're like, I really needed that. I really needed you. Thank
Yeah.
you. And you feel, oh wow, right? And that's, I love that we're ending with this, Matt, because in our next live session next Sunday, 31st, we're going to be talking about the difference between feeling and expressing. And I do kind of want to close with this, right? Once we've felt our feelings, feel our emotions, right? We kind of done a bit of like self-discovery, looking what's going on. We realize what we need, right? We
Mm-hmm.
can meet some of those needs ourselves, right? Like I need to just go out for a walk, or I need to, I don't know, play a
You need to
game
eat.
and disconnect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You eat, you
Or
need to drink, you need to.
yeah, or I need to change jobs, right? Like I need
Right.
to change jobs. Like it's something that's just your responsibility. You need to. But then there's the other side. This is where it gets a bit more like vulnerable, right? Sometimes we actually want to reach out to other people and tell them, hey, like I have this need, and you don't want to say it like that maybe, but you want to request or communicate, which is what we'll be talking about also next session.
Yeah.
That requires a lot of vulnerability,
Yeah.
right? So that's quite an art, going and being like, hey, I have a need for love. How can I find a way to connect with my partner on a deeper level right now?
Yeah.
Right?
And you say it requires vulnerability. The point really is to say that it requires a conscious awareness that we are vulnerable anyway, right? So we're vulnerable whether we want to admit it or not, right? The ones who are too self-sufficient are the ones pretending that they're not vulnerable. It's like, no, I don't need anyone, I'm all good, or I can manage myself. But really they're just hiding from that vulnerability, is that they really are vulnerable, right? And they do need other people sometimes, right? So hence, to ask for that, to communicate our needs to other people, to show other people our emotional experience, because our emotions are what signal to people what we need, right? Without us being able to communicate it effectively, right? Is that demonstration of our emotion is what shows other people, hey, I need you, come help me. It's an invitation to others to be helped, right? To be supported, to be loved.
Totally. And I love this because I think a lot of the work, for example, Brene Brown is doing is making people realize that being vulnerable is totally okay and absolutely necessary for real human connection, to be a real leader that takes people places, right? Like you said, I love the way you said it. Like we're vulnerable, whether you like it or not. Now, are you accepting that vulnerability really, or are you pretending to be something you're not? And
Yeah.
I've lived like that for a long time, right? Like pretending I don't need people, and then I became kind of like demanding, right? Like, and this is the difference, and this is where boundaries come in. We want to learn to request, right? We want to learn to share feelings and request, but
Yeah.
respect that it's not other people's jobs to fulfill our needs. So they can
Right.
say no, or they can say, hey, not now, maybe later. And
Right.
it's your job to be okay with that.
And that's what we see entitlement coming through, right? Is that maybe you've grown up in an experience where someone is so often meeting that need for you that it then becomes normal and you expect it. And it's like, well, I'm entitled to that. Like, well, maybe not. Right? They don't have to give it to you. They've just given it to you so often that now you think that it's their job to give it to you, but it wasn't. It never
and
was.
and this is a good lesson for those of you who put other people's needs before yours.
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing anybody a favor, unless it's a child, obviously, that has to be taken care of. You're not doing anybody a favor by trying to meet other people's needs constantly as if it was your responsibility. you can often meet them willingly out of love because you want to help, because you want to be there, right? Because they're your friend. But taking other people's needs as your own responsibility is really detrimental to their own self-esteem, to their own maturity. So if it, and I know a lot of people probably here have that, all right, and these extra empathetic people or extra caring people, remember, take responsibility for your own needs and really become aware of those, and let other people manage their own needs. Trust them to do that, because we all have the capacity to, all right?
Yeah. And that gives them the opportunity to show their vulnerability and ask for it, right? And then you get to feel good for giving it to them once they've asked for it, because they then say thank you afterwards. If there's this entitlement, they expect you to do it, you do it, but they're not grateful. Right? So they don't thank you for it. They're not kind and loving about it. It's just an entitlement. So
And then you end up
yeah,
feeling taken advantage of at some point. You don't feel
resentful
appreciated
and
and valued. Exactly.
right.
Cool. So let's wrap up. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and write them in the chat as we wrap up. But yeah, so let's really give a quick wrap up here. I just want to say we talked about what needs are, all right? They're kind of these basic requirements for our survival and fulfillment. It's really important to become aware of our needs. We have them, whether we like them or not. It's a matter of meeting them in a functional, conscious way, or in a dysfunctional, unconscious way, right? The functional way looks like, hey, we have a variety of ways to meet our needs. We don't depend on any one thing. We have balance, right? We feel healthy, proactive, and self-confident that we'll be able to manage that. We're aligned with our values and our life goals and purpose. And a dysfunctional way to meet our needs are avoiding emotions, all right? Not being in touch with our emotions, having distractions, just not understanding why we do what we do, masking, right? So masking what we feel with other emotions and just layering up, or even addictions, right? Like we talked about alcohol, sex, food, right? So yeah, and then we talked about also the different kinds of needs. We looked at two frameworks, Maslow's pyramid, right? From the most basic to the higher order. And we looked at Tony Robbins' 6 core needs as well.
Yeah.
And then we talked about how, right? So how can we meet these needs? And we talked about first getting really in touch with your own feelings and emotions, taking full responsibility for yourself on every level, and doing that bit of self-discovery, okay? Reflecting with yourself, trial and error, but with that self-reflection, right? That's the difference between just like failing and learning, right? That you understand what you did wrong and you can do it better next time. And then we finished with owning, and the importance of owning your own vulnerability and accepting it, to be able to communicate those needs, to admit them, and to request other people for them, right? So that you create that beautiful ecosystem of having your needs met.
And that's that idea of saying, well, I'm not responsible to meet my needs. I'm responsible to have my needs met, right? Whether that be by myself or by an experience or by someone else. I'm responsible to have that need met, not I'm responsible to meet them all myself. Yeah.
Exactly, totally. And so, cool, guys. Well, we have one question here. In a romantic relationship, is the less needy person in control of the relationship?
Yeah, I like that, because it's quite often seen the opposite way, actually, is that the person who doesn't need anything, right, is either giving or not giving, right? And they can control and manipulate the other person, right? Because they're so strong, if you like, in terms of I don't need anyone, is that I can manipulate with the other person's vulnerability. Right. So, but here there is a manipulation that can come on both ways. So I'd like to share that both the needy person is manipulating the others by saying, I need this, you have to give it to me. It's not okay. I can't survive if you don't give this to me. And so that's a form of manipulation to get the other person to do what you want them to do, right? Because otherwise you're vulnerable and you'll fall apart. Right. And often we see like people threatening, like the worst case situation, threatening suicide if you don't stay with me, right? So you have to stay with me, if not I'm going to kill myself, right? That's the ultimate, I give all responsibility for my needs to you, and if you don't, I'm going to die, right? But then the other side is the person who is needless, right? Who shows they're completely independent, they don't need anyone, and then they can manipulate the other one by giving or not giving the love, right? Giving or not giving the ability to meet someone's vulnerabilities. right? So that's like, well, if you don't behave the way I want you to, I won't meet your need anymore, right? I'll play the silent game, right? And I'll ignore you for a while, right? I don't need you, so I don't need you to meet my needs, but you need me, so I'll manipulate you in that respect. So behave how I want you to, or I won't give you love, right? So both sides of that dysfunctional situation can be in control, if you like, of that relationship, but it's a false control, right? Because you're not actually managing the relationship. You're just using the other person to meet your needs, right? So that's all you're doing in that respect. If you find a healthy relationship where you're able to communicate clearly and both people are aware and conscious of their vulnerabilities, and it's like, hey, I'll meet yours, you meet mine, right, to a certain extent, then you're creating a relationship. That is the idea of a relationship, right? Is that two people are reciprocal, right? Either end of that scale, and you don't have reciprocity, right? So you don't really have a relationship. You have an addiction, right? You're just using the other person, and so you're addicted to the other person. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about the needy person, like, because does the other person who's not the needy one not have needs? Of course they do, right?
Yeah.
So if they do need the needy person for something, are they scared to show it because they don't want to feel like they need the person? Right. So it creates a very unhealthy dynamic.
And often it's the person who looks like they're needless, the entirely independent person who has the most addictions, right? Because they're meeting their need for something, right, by usually a distraction, right, or an addiction. It's like, rather than needing that intimacy, that closeness with someone, I'll have a relationship with alcohol. I'll have a relationship with pornography, right? So I'm meeting my need on my own, right, away from that scary thing of vulnerability with people, right? I'll do it in a safe way for me, right? But really, it's just masking the need. I'm not actually fulfilling my need for intimacy. It's a false. I'm faking myself, right? I'm conning myself, giving myself something just to make myself feel better, but I'm not actually meeting the need.
And just because I'm so scared to be vulnerable,
right?
I'm so scared that people will see,
right? Because
that I need someone.
We've all got good reasons, right? Both people on that have good reasons that they are like that, right? So it's like the needy person, they've grown up in a relationship where they haven't been given more responsibility, right? They haven't been made to know that it's okay for them to go out and try to meet their own need, right? And if it doesn't go well, don't worry, I'll be here for you, right? And then you can try again tomorrow, right? And you get that development of meeting your own needs, which is what you should get as a child, right? As you grow up, your parents are first of all fully responsible for your needs, and as you grow up, the parent slowly pulls back and has less and less responsibility for the child's needs, and the child learns to meet their own, right? So that's the needy side, is that they're like that because they were not given responsibility. Either someone kept saving them, kept rescuing them, right? So they denied them the opportunity to grow, right? Or the other side is like, well, I will, anytime you show me you need something, I'll punish you, right? Anytime you cry, I'll tell you off. So, because remember, emotions are our communication to other people that needs were not met, right? So let's say you say something horrible to your kid, right? And your kid cries, right? So the child is trying to demonstrate that they're not happy, that they're not okay, that a need wasn't met, that maybe we were too hard with them or something, right? And then we just double down with, well, stop crying, big girls don't cry, right? Or some form of shaming about the experience that they're demonstrating to us, right? So that's what will create somebody who is, if you like, needless, right? Is that they don't want to show that vulnerability because as a child, when they did show it, it was then met with some form of disapproval from the parent or caregiver and so on. Yeah. So both of those groups of people, both dysfunctional people, right, they're like that, or we're like that because of our upbringing, right? And it's up to us now to say, okay, well, my parents didn't do a great job, or my caregivers, or the people around me, the community, the culture didn't do the best job of teaching me this stuff. So now I'm responsible as an adult to have those needs met and to learn to become vulnerable and to acknowledge my vulnerability, but know that I'm responsible to have those needs met, right? Not being overly dependent or overly independent.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if anybody does want to read more up on this, this is the attachment styles, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good work. Yeah. it's attachment styles and also a bit of that codependent narcissistic dynamic, right? So
Yeah.
codependency and narcissism and attachment styles are things that you guys can read up on
Yeah.
if you want to know more about these
Overachieving,
dynamics.
underachieving is another one. If you're overachieving, you're pushing very hard to be more than human, right? So that's the person who doesn't need anything. It's like, I'm good at everything. I'm going to be the overachiever. I'm going to prove that nobody needs me, right? Or the underachiever, which is me, right, is the person who's like, I'm not going to even try, because if I try, then I might fail, right? So the underachiever is like, I'm afraid of being shamed for my failure, so I won't try anyway, right? So that side of it. So a really good one is The Ultimate You book by Sharon Pearson, right? So that's a really good one that brings in all of these elements together. Yeah, and there's all kinds of books that I'd actually love to recommend, but start with that one. That's a good one. The Ultimate
Cool,
You,
guys.
Quest Edition.
Okay, Quest Edition. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we're gonna wrap up then. Thank you so much for being here today. We have the next live session where we're going to be talking about how to express our needs, no, our emotions. So what the difference is between feeling, which we've talked about a lot, and expressing. All right, next.
And that's basically that balance, isn't it? Between when do I show my vulnerabilities and ask somebody else to meet it, and when do I be more independent and meet it myself, or postpone it until later.
Exactly. I'm so excited.
Or do I keep it to myself?
I'm so excited to talk about that because I think that's something we all struggle with. When do I show it? When not, right? And in this, we all need to understand how to do this better, and when it's okay and when it's not. All right. So that's what we'll be diving into. So thank you so much, and we'll see you hopefully next Sunday.